All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome. It is another Wednesday, and you know what time it is on Wednesday. It is the greatest hour of your week. It is tipping points and puzzle pieces with resilient ecosystems. So we got another great show for you today, designed to stimulate your thought and to bring us together. So let me bring up our distinguished gentlemen today. And as always, how you doing today, Mr. Mark?
I'm doing really well, but I was thinking, as you said, bring people together. Today's topic could bring them together or tear them apart.
Well, you know what? And I think that's fair. But I would say, in all fairness, you say that you like my saying of intellectual honesty, right?
Hmm.
Everyone talks about, well, we need to have these hard conversations, but then when the conversations start to be had, all of a sudden no one can have the hard conversations, right? It just appears to be too hard for us to have. So we do have to have the conversations, and we have to, work past our emotions and our feelings and being triggered and all those things. And, again, it's okay to have those feelings, but you got to work past it. You got to, power through it. Take breaks if you need to, but stay at the table. That's the only way we're going to get to the other side.
Absolutely, and a lot of that has to do with intent.
Hmm.
You have to, if you're having an honest conversation, you have to believe that the person has no intent to hurt you, but
Hmm.
has the intent to have the conversation. So you might want to listen a little closer and forgive a little bit of your filtering of what they're saying.
And I think it's important too. And I would say I got to give a shout out to Akuye for this. She does a lot of healing circles, right? And I kind of look at the things like, hey, we're all adults here, so we should, we're coming to the table. We know that we need to be intellectually honest. We know we're going to hear things we might not agree with. We're going to feel some kind of way about it. We're going to push through, but they actually take time to kind of set the rules, beforehand. And although it seems elementary or primary schoolish, it is necessary to put people in that frame of mind, check in with folks during the conversation so that it doesn't go off the rails. So I do appreciate that. And I think that's really an effective way of communication. So shout out to her
Yeah,
for that.
I have sat in several circles where those rules are set, and the communication is much stronger, much more intentful, and people tend to listen because they were reminded going into it that it's not there to attack them, it's not there to trigger them, it's there to have a conversation. And we've said this, you and I both said this on this program, that it's not about us. When somebody says something, they're not talking about us. They're talking about, if it's directly at us, it's their vision of who we are
Mm-hmm.
through their
Mm-hmm.
filters, their life experiences, their ability to see. And the same goes for us with them. As much as we'd like to say we're super people and have, X-ray vision to see through all the bullshit and all of our own filters, the truth is we're seeing other people the same way they're seeing us through our filters and our life experiences. And it takes discipline and intentionality to put your triggers on hold so you can hear and ask questions so that you can understand.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what's our topic of the day today, Mr. Mark?
Word games. My
Oh,
little
all
Scrabble
right.
board up here. Um, I have kind of an idea and a format which is a little different than we normally use, but I
Okay.
wanted to start off with something that's been a hot topic on Facebook recently. I'm following a few groups about affordable housing in Kitsap County,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there's been a discussion about our Bremerton City Council using a term called zombie home in the and I could be misremembering this, so please don't hold me. And Michael can correct me on this because he's part of the same group and part of the same discussion. Um, if I remember correctly, this was a city council meeting around the mayor's affordable housing plan, and one of the aspects is they were talking about um, looking at zombie homes as a possible resource for creating affordable housing or property for affordable housing. So I
Mm-hmm.
sent you a definition from Google on that, and this is kind of one of the questions I have is like this triggered me, and I
Okay.
had to stop and go, what is a zombie home? I mean, it's kind of a very ambiguous term. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is it a home where the virus that creates zombies is in? And do I need a shotgun before I go anywhere near the place? Or, what does that actually mean? And how is a city council using a term like that is meaningful? So, from Google definition, it was zombie homes can be defined as vacant, deteriorated, wow, can't speak, small homes whose owners are behind in their mortgage payments. These properties are symbols of the effects of foreclosure crisis in neighborhoods throughout the city. Um, so, what does that mean if the city council is looking at that as a resource? And Michael, please correct me if I'm not using that properly. But from what I understood from the conversation that you guys were having, was that the city council is looking at the zombie homes as a potential resource for land use for creating affordable houses. Is that correct? And while we're waiting for Michael to type that answer, um, I can see lots of questions that cause me issues with this description. But the biggest question I have is a city council using a term like zombie home to describe anything.
Mm-hmm. So what gives you pause on that?
Okay, so people are behind in rent. I mean, you just put out a flyer saying that you're helping people with eviction notices, and your G2 is offering free services and free rides for meetings. We know that there's a crisis across the country that's already happening post COVID about home evictions. People
Mm-hmm.
got behind because they weren't able to work. Um, we can have another topic day talking about the economy and the um, misunderstandings about what economy is and
Right.
how we're being told things that are patently untrue about the health of the economy. Um, but zombie home and looking at the definition, I'm going, okay, so somebody got behind on their home. So now the city is going to do eminent domain and take their property
Mm.
and turn it over to a developer. I mean, I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm saying that's the thought process that goes through my head when I see something like that.
Gotcha. Now, it's interesting. I
Okay.
just heard this term about a week ago, and there's I think a nonprofit organization that are going after these homes over on the East Coast. So this is when I so interesting that you would bring this up today, because that's what I heard of. Now, when I think of zombie homes, I think more of like zombie properties, right? Like the old Sizzler on Wheaton Way, the old Denny's on Wheaton Way. We have so many empty buildings, and it's like, okay, so wait a minute, you're going to go after homeowners and not after the business owners, like that have these, that are using it as a line item depreciation asset, and it's cheaper for them just to let it sit and use it as a write off than for them to come in and be forced to either sell it or do something with the property. So when I think of zombie homes, I'm thinking more of like zombie business
Brilliant.
properties,
And
not
that brings
coming
up
in and taking someone's house. Like,
right, and that brings up another thing that happens in my head. Now, again, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not proposing that it is true, but historically, people without voices are the ones that get abused, and property owners that may be sitting on businesses for depreciation have a voice,
mm-hmm,
and impoverished people who are struggling don't
mm-hmm,
frequently have a voice. So that scares me and causes me to have a internal reaction to the city council talking about zombie homes. You've got people in homes, you're going to get them out of homes to create affordable homes. Well, that makes no sense.
I'll just smile there and give us a small grin. Michael says, unfortunately, I've not been able to be as active this week. I am not too familiar with the topic, but sounds like the general idea.
Okay. So anyway, my biggest concern here again with words and word games is that a city council would be using the term zombie home, which makes the topic vague about what they're really looking to do. If they're going
Mm-hmm.
to say that they're going to be taking homes from people who are behind on rent and or mortgage payments, who are looking to being evicted by the bank and something, say that. Don't cover that up. Say it. Who
Mm-hmm.
are the people you're going after? What is the property you're going after? Don't try and hide it under a term like zombie home. If
Well,
it's
I
not
think
what
what
you're
they're
doing, then
doing
say
is,
that too.
I think what they're capitalizing on is, you hear the phrase, "There's nothing new under the sun," and why reinvent the wheel? So it's like, hey, this is the latest high impact practice, right? Uh, so let's go ahead and adopt this because there's other folks that are doing this and it works. Yeah, to me, it's like, well, if there are people in the home that can't pay their mortgage, why don't you help them stay in their homes and find other solutions? But it's just like you
Exactly.
said. So you're going to displace them and then put someone else in there. And so what are you going to do with those folks?
Right.
Right.
And as I've said before in our twice now in our pancake breakfast with KCR and Bremerton Housing Authority is that resources are shrinking for cities, and development is one of the few ways that they can bring in income. I just don't want people displaced to bring in income for new developments that may or may not be low income housing at the end of it. I don't
uh,
see any guarantees that any of that is going to be low income housing. Matter of fact, I don't see any guarantees or real plans that I would consider a plan at all.
well, I mean, what are we calling low income housing now?
Yeah, 2,000 a month. When most
Well,
jobs are $15 an hour, $1,200 a month is a challenge.
mm-hmm.
We did the numbers a few months ago. We shouldn't be doing them again, or not at this time. But my
No, no,
point
I,
is,
I, I think where the goalpost gets shifted is, the community is saying we need low, low cost rentals and low cost mortgages. What the organizations are saying, well, what we're offering is market rate, right? And it's like, well, market rate isn't affordable. Market rate isn't low income. It's low income based on the lens that they look at it in because it's their bottom. But
yeah,
for us, it's already a ceiling, right?
I when I took statistics, I quoted this to the teacher in college. I said, I'm taking this class, but I truly believe that lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can make market rates say anything you want them to say, depending on the questions you ask and the data you use.
Mhm.
And very few people actually bring verifiable data to the table. And people will hate on me for that, fine. But I always like source material, and I read a lot of it.
Hmm.
Anyway, my point about zombie homes is that it is an imprecise way to describe the situation. And words need to be more precise than we use them to be. And that's really what today's topic is. let's look at the words and how we use them and how we feel about them, and understand that we can't communicate with each other if we don't use precise words.
What do you want to jump into our words?
Well, I want to use one more example, and then we will.
Okay.
The next example I want is a topic that came up last week. Um, a Lizzo, I believe, is the artist's name. There was a lot of articles about a word that she used in her new song for her new album. She used the word spaz, and it's a word that's common usage. People don't even understand what it really means, which comes back from its root word is spastic, which has been a derogatory term for cerebral people with cerebral palsy and other spasmine illnesses. When she discovered that, she changed the lyric over the weekend and apologized. Now, I'm not promoting her album or saying anything about her. It's just straight out the news story, and the fact that when she realized it was a derogatory term, she stepped up and said, "No, I don't want that in my song. It's not what the song is about." And I think that shows a really positive way of looking at language and words. This is
Hmm.
going to hurt some people. I think that it needs to be a different word. And she came up with a different word that apparently is equally strong and didn't have that connotation with it. So
All
there's
right.
lots of words, and when we're not precise with our words, we can be unintentionally hurtful.
And I put the article there for
Okay.
you. The Lizzo article was in the LA Times there, so you can follow it there. Shout out to the LA Times for that.
Okay, so I want to start the next section of this with one of my favorite quotes,
Mhm.
and it kind of gives a mirror image of a word. This is attributed to an ancient Chinese quote. It says, "May you live in interesting times." And depending on how you look at it, that could be a really good thing, or that could be a really bad thing. I usually think of that as more of a curse than a blessing in any way, shape, or form, because interesting could be really interesting. It's neither good nor bad. It's what it is. And I have a flashcard up for this so that we can start the discussion with that. And it's this one, the first one's going to be easy. It's more of a question. Um, do you think interesting is good or bad? I mean, when somebody says that's interesting, how do you feel about that? Or that's interesting. Our language is as much about words as it is about inflection and how we use those words. And
Absolutely.
so this is kind of part of the conversation. And this is about, well, that's interesting, or wow, that's really interesting, or today was really interesting. It's all in how the inflection, one word means so many different things.
Hmm.
And even though I was trying to be clear with my inflections on those words, there are people out there that will hear it differently than I intended it.
Oh, facts.
So
Absolutely.
how do we begin to talk to each other? How do we even begin to have conversations when the words we use can have so many different meanings?
Is that rhetorical, or do you want me to answer?
That's not rhetorical.
So, you know, checking for understanding is paramount and really important, right? Uh, we demonstrate this almost in every show, right? I'll say something, or you'll make a joke, and it's like, and I'll say, you know, hey, I take it this way, and you're like, no, no, I don't mean it to be that way. And so checking for understanding is really important, right? Understanding the person you're having the conversation with and what the context is. You know, have you built up a level of trust with that person where they're not trying to hurt you? So an inquiry or a statement, it may be steeped in ignorance, and not ignorance is a bad thing, but of ignorance of not knowing and wanting to know and understand versus being offensive, right? And so checking for understanding is really important. So if you hear something and you're like, okay, that made me feel some kind of way, how do you mean that? You know, Is this how you intended that? And if it is, then let's have a conversation about that because I'm feeling some kind of way about that. I think that really it can be so simple if we just try.
Yeah, it is, but how many times, and this is kind of the crux of it, how many times do people hear what they think that you're saying and feel hurt and not say a word, not clarify, not give you the benefit of peaceful intent, but feel hurt and take it away and end the conversation and
Well, I
never
think
ask the question.
it happens a lot, and I think it happens even more now as we see. Well, I'll just talk about our politicians, our mainstream media. Right? There's a lot of intellectual dishonesty. There's a lot of mudslinging. There's a lot of intentionally not taking the things the right way, not dismantling the argument based in fact and going away from opinion or leaning too heavily on opinion or talking points, right? It's like I just got to get my talking points out there. I just need to counter this, right? And they do that, right? So and you'll see it if you're watching it, and it can be tremendously difficult to sift through and actually understand the argument for both sides, right? So like I watch Fox News, I watch MSNBC, I watch both sides of it because I think there's something to be gained from listening to both sides, but you have to sift through all the BS to see what is actually like, okay, yeah, you know what? I actually agree with that. That stat is actually a a good stat to look at and not a red herring or a false flag or whatever these things can be that folks are a straw man argument that are being pushed out there.
Complete and utter BS.
Well, but that takes a lot of work,
Well, yeah.
you
Sometimes
know.
sometimes people say things like it's true and it's complete and utter BS. I mean that's part of the thing these days, and people jump up and go oh and rally around it, and you just look at them and go wow, okay. I do want to say something here.
Sure.
A few weeks ago, a week or so ago, somebody heard me say something and took it the wrong way, or took it away, whatever that way is. I invite people to ask me questions. Understand my intent is to communicate with you, to help build community, to help you communicate with each other. That is 100% of what I'm interested in. If you hear me say something that sets you off, email me, mark@roseco.org, and ask a question. Message me on Facebook, Mark Boatwright-Frost. I will be happy to engage in that conversation with you. I am more than happy to answer any questions you have, but ask the question. Don't assume I'm trying to hurt you. Don't assume I'm saying something that is hurtful. Maybe I need to be educated. Whatever way that has to happen, ask me the question. I invite you to ask me the question. It will not offend me.
Well,
Well, hold on. Be polite in asking the question, but the question itself will not offend me.
so I'll say two things there. One, I think it's important that, and I'm glad that you're stating that, and I think more people need to state that. Uh, Going back to my last point, and then I'll build on what you just said now. The other thing is that I think why it's so hard to have conversation and build relationship with people is when you're watching one side consistently just use talking points or be disingenuous, right? It's like, okay, so I'm supposed to come to the table and be an honest broker with someone who's not, right? And so it's like, look, at this point now, everywhere I go, this is what I'm facing. So now I'm going to be guarded and standoffish, and I'm not going to look at anything that you say because you've bit me. A snake is a snake. You've bit me every time, and you're telling me, I promise you, I'm not biting you this time. And it's like, man, I'm watching you bite everyone else. So, you've done it consistently. I've seen these in your interactions. So it makes it really difficult to bridge that gap, right? So you can
Yeah.
extend an olive branch, but you don't know if that person is going to say, you know what? I see that olive branch, and I am going to put down the talking point. Um, I am
All
going
you
to
can do is
listen to what
invite.
you're saying.
All you can do is invite. My job is not to make people talk to me. My job is to invite them to talk to me and address them honestly and with as pure of intent as I can possibly have.
Now, the other thing that I'll say to that is this, and there's two things, right? So I've got a counterpoint to what I'm saying. One, I love the fact that you're saying that, right? Because it does open up the conversation for people to know where you're coming from. That is not your intention, right? You are
Yes.
expressing what you think, what your value set is, information or research that you've gathered, and so there may be information that you don't have as you are stating your points or your ideas.
There's
On the
almost certainly information I don't have, and
Now,
that's
on
a
the
given.
other, yeah, but on the other hand, I learned this in a diversity conference at the college several years ago, and one of the things that they were saying is, you know, let's say whoever it is, right? When you're looking at uh, straw man arguments or talking points, as I was saying before, and then someone comes and they ask a question that is offensive or they make a statement that's offensive and it's like, well, I just don't know, that's why I'm asking, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute, you know I don't want you to come to me asking me questions and you haven't even tried to learn, right? It's like, it's so lazy to say, well, you know what, I don't know, I'm just coming to you, you tell me, right? You represent all black people. I'm trying to figure out how you understand things by coming to you. And I'm just using that as an example. And it's like, so wait a minute. You've done all this research on this, that, and the other, but now when it comes to this, you're just coming and just spewing out things. And I'm supposed to just take that and be like, oh, I'm the problem because I've taken it some kind of way because you put it out there. So I think there needs to be balance on both sides of that.
There is, but as again, all I can do is invite people to reach out and ask and or begin a conversation. And I will come to it honestly. I will come to it with as pure and positive intent as I can, and I will listen.
And that's very refreshing because who do we see saying that now in mainstream media or politicians or whatever the case may be?
Nobody? Well, we're going to get there actually. So let's move to the next one, which is
Sure.
slide or number two, because it's been interesting to this point, but let's really love on each other. So
Peace,
I was
man.
kind of I was kind of amused this morning because Terry had the Amazon thingy do smooth rock from the 70s, and it was one bad love song after bad love song after bad love song. He cheated, she cheated, they cheated, they have mismatched love. And I'm like going, wow, I really need to put the word love in here because I think we have a really different view of love. And to talk about a word that generates more confusion than anything else on the planet. My ex said, and I have to say that this is one of the best lines she's ever given me, is that happiness is having your expectations met.
Mm.
So the thought is that if you're going to be happy, you'd better set your expectations appropriately. Do we, and I'm good, this is not a rhetorical question, I'm going to ask you directly and the audience directly. Do we have reasonable expectations around love?
No, no, not at all. Because I don't think we define love the same way. You know, uh, it- what kind of love are you talking about?
Exactly. I mean, I know love. I know people have love of God, and that's one thing. We have love of our brother, but do we? Um, Valentine's Day. We talk about Valentine's Day around here as VD, like venereal disease.
Wow.
Um, it's like if you don't love each other the rest of the year, what's one day going to mean? And really, let's be honest, it's a capitalistic holiday. It's about buying stuff, and the expectations set are insane. How is some kid going to do all that needs to be done to prove his love to somebody? I mean, it's setting expectations that are insanely out of whack. But love is a beautiful thing, and please, I'm going to say it now. I believe in love, but I believe in love as in two people building love over time together. And we can have a long conversation about it offline of this channel about why I think that way, but I don't think love is something that strikes you. I think the whole love at first sight thing, there's attraction at first sight, but love takes time. Love of God takes time. Love of each other takes time. It's something that you have to build, but we have all of these expectations around love, and it's one of those terms that gets used against us to empty our pocketbooks.
That's interesting. Continue. I'm
And
enthralled.
so love is a really powerful thing. Love is all of the things about love. There's some truth in it, but how it's used to motivate us and to chastise us, to set expectations. I think that we need to sit down and actually have a talk with love. I mean, I literally have a conversation with people saying, relationships are hard and love takes time. And you feel the attraction gets you to a certain point, but then the work starts. And if you look at the statistics for divorce in this country, it's appalling. How can we say that love works when we have so much divorce? Well, the trouble is that love takes work, and that's never given to us as part of our life learning. Is that it's about working and building a partnership.
Uh, Michael says no. What do you say no in regards to Michael?
I think it was the first question about love.
Oh, okay. Um, that's interesting. I think part of what's difficult is the love that I need may not be the love that you're capable of giving or
Yep,
desiring to give, and
that
vice
would be
versa.
mismatched expectations, maybe.
Right, right. And I experience that all the time, right? Um, and that could look at, oh well, you're not loyal, right? You wouldn't hurt me if you really loved me. You wouldn't hurt me that way. We hear all these things, we say all these things, we do all these things, right? So we want to be loved in a certain way, but then we may not be willing to extend that love to someone. He says correct, but I disagree. True love does not or should not take work. Interesting. Do you
Okay.
believe in unconditional love, Michael? Because I don't. I don't believe in unconditional love.
Oh, you don't have dogs.
Really? I don't know. I don't. I don't know if the dog is pooping everywhere, or throwing up everywhere, or tearing my stuff up. I don't think I'm gonna have unconditional love for that.
No, but
You
they
know,
give you unconditional love.
that doesn't feel like love. They would not do that if they
Actually,
truly love me. They wouldn't hurt me that way.
yeah, actually, I do believe in unconditional love, but it's something you work for, and that's Michael and I. Michael, you and I can have a conversation offline about it. I'm happy to do so because I'd really love to hear your thinking on it.
Mm.
Um, and actually, I've already invited you for coffee once, so please message me and we'll set up a time to go have coffee. Um,
Well, what's your next word? Because that's a correct, but that is a love is a minefield. Love is a battlefield. Is that Pat Benatar?
yes, it is.
Ah, there we go. Finally. All right.
Okay, so the next one is humanity.
Humanity.
What
All right.
is humanity? I get this. Okay, so I will say up front, I have a very clear and probably very different picture of what humanity is
Hmm.
than you do, and than the audience does. I have spent a lot of time working on a definition of humanity that works for me. And when
Okay.
somebody says, "Oh, it's just human nature," my first inclination is to say, "Is it? That's interesting." um, is the things we attribute to human nature really human nature, or is it how we react given our cultural framework?
Hmm.
Is it our core humanity? I mean, humanity is one of those words that gets used a lot. Again, it's another word that gets used to manipulate us a lot. But I do not believe, and I'll be flat out, I do not believe that we have a clear a current clear picture of what humanity is or what being a human being is, because we're too busy being told, well, this is just human nature, this is humanity, and it's it's a question. Yes, Rob, and that's kind of my point. But um, but it's interesting. So humanity, I get told that some really nasty things are human nature, and I said, is it human nature? And we're back to the nature versus nurture. Is it um, is it our cultural messaging? Is it our socioeconomic environment? Is it our true humanity? And I'm just going to ask the questions because this is a very long conversation, and I think that you can think about it because all of us have been told, oh, that's just human nature, and you just kind of like cock your head and you just accept it, or like me, you go, really, huh? There is some, Michael, but again, that is variable depending on whether you're talking to a psychologist, psychiatrist, sociologist, anthropologist, archaeologist. They all have slightly different variations. And we're going to be getting to why that is in just a moment. So let's go to community, the next slide, or the next one. This is the most powerful word for me in social media because the minute I put community in a post, I get a whole lot more views. People are driven to the word of community. But I'd like to ask a question here because I'm not entirely certain of the answer of that. And considering that all of the work we're doing is around building community, not having an answer is a little bit discomforting for me. What is community? I know what I think it is, but it's not certainly what other people are telling me it is. It's certainly not what we're being sold it is at every turn to get us to participate in things.
Hmm.
How can, and my point here is, as we've gone through the last few words, how can we communicate if we can't even agree on the definition of the words and their meanings?
You know, I talk about, well, I talked about this, and when I talk communications, to go back to humanity, we think of all the, the synonyms, right? Brotherly love,
Mm-hmm.
compassion, kindness, all those things are humanity. And really the opposite of that, the cruelty, the evilness that people can do isn't humanity, it's inhumanity, right? It is the opposite of it. But we use these terms and these words, I'll say lazily for lack of a better word, right?
Sometimes
Uh,
interchangeably.
yeah, or interchangeably. And it's not really what the word means. And so we often have to have a common framework to have dialogue, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
using the same word, but we mean something, maybe a little different or several degrees different. And we can't come to an understanding, right?
Yep,
And that kind of goes back to a social contract, which we talk
it
about
does.
often also.
Well, it does. And Michael just brought up the community piece, and I agree with some of it, but I think that's a little limiting. I think that we can start with some form of commonality based on our human needs. It doesn't necessarily have to be morals or ideals, as it does some form of commonality on which to build.
But wouldn't those commonalities be built on morals and ideas?
Maybe, maybe not. Whose morals and ideas?
The community.
And and what community is that?
And that's why I think he's saying people close to you
And
or geographically, right?
I
Through
and
that
I'm not being
conversation, you'll
yeah,
say
I'm not being
food.
facetious. Yeah, I'm not being facetious, but I think us as human beings at the start, if we look at our core humanity, in a real sense of humanity, as opposed to a cultural definition, whatever multiple forms that is of humanity, we will find
Hmm.
more in common than not. But when you start talking about morals and ideas, you start talking about how indoctrinated you are into a certain part of culture. And again, indoctrination is a harsh word, and a lot of people don't like that word. But culture indoctrinates us at every point. You pointed out earlier, some people watch MSNBC and some people watch Fox News, and some people like me don't watch any of it and do all of our news and reading. Um, but the fact is, we're all indoctrinated in some way of thinking by what we agree with and we don't agree with. And I think that to some degree does us a disservice. And while
Hmm.
I won't say that that is uh, a human nature thing, it is a commonality amongst many people because we're looking for answers and ways to consolidate and identify people and situations like us. Again, this is a word that we're not going to come to a conclusion on today, but it's something to think about. And if we move to the next one, and I'm kind of building on this theme, the next one is trust, and we talked about that earlier. But I would say that having communication is trust based. Having building a community is trust based. So I'd say one of the core building blocks of community, of love, of any relationship is building trust. And unfortunately, trust is another thing that can be used against us. We sometimes trust things that aren't true or aren't real, and through no fault of our own, except that we are being fed information.
So let me ask you, how do we build trust in such an untrustworthy time?
By sitting down and connecting with each other and believing the intent. It's hard. You have to trust that the process will work of sitting down and talking to somebody and hoping that they're not so broken that they will betray you.
Well,
I
let
mean,
me.
you said multiple times that you and I disagree on things, and we
Mhm.
do. But I trust you to have the conversation with me, and that has happened over months of working together. And you trust me to have the conversation with you, and you trust me not to have ill intent towards you, and I trust you not to have ill intent toward me, even though we have wildly divergent backgrounds and
Mhm.
we have wildly divergent um, variations in our societal connections. We trust that the other does not mean us harm, and so therefore we are learning to see through our filters.
So let me not make it as stark an example. Um, when we think about COVID, right?
Mhm.
Uh, we can look at the political parties, right? Left versus right. But family members started going in on each other over politics or COVID or things of that nature. So where there was already trust in the community of family and relationship, then that
Yeah.
also has eroded. There are folks that aren't talking to each other today over COVID, or other very polarizing things that have destroyed families internally. So
Okay,
amen.
so there's an assumption that families have a built-in block to start with. I Wow. Okay, so let's just strip Mark bare today. Um, my family life was broken and painful, and I wouldn't trust my sister to save my to for anything on earth. There's nothing that would cause me to trust my sister in any way, shape, or form. Um, my family life was a very painful experience that falls under the if it does not kill you, it makes you stronger.
Mm.
And I know a lot of people just exactly like that. And so when you say broken family bonds, I know a lot of people that never got vaccinated. And I said, well, this is the reason I think you should, but I'm not going to ride you about it. I'm just going to let it go. And if you get sick, I'll try and help you. I got vaccinated because the science made good sense to me. But in a world where we don't have trust for information that comes through, that is given to us, we have all these breakdowns, and there's lots of reasons not to trust anything. But we have to learn to trust each other, which means we have to trust ourselves in to be okay in a relationship. And and I don't want to shoot holes in the family breakdown, but to me in my life, my family was non-existent in a lot of ways. During my primary years, my parents were never there. I was raised by a woman who took care of the house while they worked all the time, and I mean literally 80, 90 hours a week. They would not be around.
Mm.
Um, I had a sister who tried to do damage to me at every chance she could. So my belief in families being somehow anointed with trust and bonds, it's not been my experience. It's one of those filters that I look at life through. And so I think that we just need to make, because we decided to, which was a line from the Newsroom, which is a HBO series. So why did we do that? Because we decided to. I think that we need to decide to have to build trust with each other, as scary and horrifyingly difficult as that seems. And I'm doing the best I can by saying, ask me, come to me, talk to me. I will be as open with you as I can, and I will treat your trust as a gold.
Yeah, what I would say, and I think what I mean by that is your experience is definitely not unique. There's a lot of folks that have had that same experience as you. Um, but there have been family members that were close, that, COVID and the vaccine became this dividing rod, and it fractured the family when typically they did stand together and had good communication and everything else. So just really unfortunate. Michael says people need to understand something though. Just because I disagree with you or your ideas does not mean I dislike or hate you. I don't know where this
Exactly.
philosophy came from and why it is so prevalent. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think it gets reinforced in every aspect of our lives, right? Through our politics and our social media and our mainstream or legacy news outlets, and we just kind of retreat to our echo chambers where it's safe. And as I said, when you try to reach out and have that conversation, if you are having a conversation with someone that's just trying to make their point and be heard, but they're not listening, then it just makes you become even more entrenched. And I think that's why we're so far gone right now, a lot of us, unfortunately. And it's going to take, you know, things like this, A, B, C, D, all of the above, all of these tactics and ideals to come together and kind of break through this and show people a different way. What's your next word there?
Okay, so I'm going to skip a few because we're running out of time.
Okay.
Um, I think we're going to skip to. I really do have to jump on this one. Number 9, represent.
Which one is it?
Represent.
Represent. Okay.
Okay, so represent, it's obviously one of the new slang words, but what I really mean is representation. And this comes right after the word government, which we don't have time to even touch on. But I want to ask a question. We call the people that we send to the House of Representatives representatives of us. They're supposed to represent the people that they support. In states and in the federal government, these are supposed to be representative. Um, I want to ask a question here that will probably get me in trouble. Marwan's going to laugh again and everything else. But who the hell exactly do these people represent?
Who are you talking about? Who people?
I'm not going to go right or left. I'm going to go any. Let's say the federal House of Representatives. Who
Okay.
exactly do these people represent? They certainly don't represent me. They don't. I'm pretty sure don't represent you. Um, I can say without calling names, I can say that I know 3 people who are representatives from Washington State who have never had a job outside of politics or building for politics in their lives. And Most of us have to struggle with rent. Most of us have to worry about making bills. Today, we have to worry about whether we're going to be able to keep our house or it becomes a zombie home. You know, how is somebody who's never ever lived the life that I live or any part of the life that I live supposed to represent me to the federal government and in place policies and laws that represent me, you, or anybody else?
You know what? I almost wonder if that's possible, just because there's so much nuance with each person, uh, because we're not just one thing. You know, we're so many different things. That can you actually have representation?
Well, we can
Or
on
to
the
what
basic.
percent can you have representation? Should I say?
I think up to 50%. I think Michael's right with the super PACs, corporations, and their lobbying parasites. That's who they're representing because that's who gets them reelected because it's about reelection.
Right.
But if unless someone like and I'm going to use the AOC, she worked for a living. She had a job. She had to pay rent before she became a representative, went to the House of Representatives. She is more representative of me and the people I know than a bunch of the people, and I have no statistics, but I'm guessing over 50% of the people in the House of Representatives have no do not represent through experience or knowledge any large section of their populace. How many of them have experienced poverty? Since half our country has, I can say 50% of the people there have never can't represent the people who are experiencing poverty or are homeless, and that's growing. How can they solve the problem unless they understand the problem? We're looking at inflation growing crazy, and it's really beautiful that the COVID benefits are still being applied to the SNAP benefits to people getting SNAP. But I'm not hearing any talk in Congress about, well, with inflation going on, shouldn't we tie SNAP to inflation so people get a percentage increase in their SNAP benefits so they can continue to buy food even though food prices are going up 20 and 30%? I mean,
Well,
how do they
I
represent
agree
us?
with what you're saying, but I think that's putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound, right? It's like, why are these things being increased uncontrollably in the first place?
Well, yes, but what we're talking about is the word representative or
Right.
represent. Who do they represent? I mean, we use that word that they're the House of Representatives and we accept that they are representing us, but do they really? There's a much bigger conversation that's around government and the party system and all the rest of it we can have. But the fact is, does the House of Representatives represent the people, their constituents who vote them in every time?
So then my question is how do we get folks in that represent? Do we put a cap on how much they earn? Right? If you've made over 80,000 or $100,000 a year, uh,
Again, that's a much bigger conversation because we have to talk about the party system if we're going to talk about that, and we're
I
going to
know.
talk
I
about
think
the
it's
fact
good
that
to put
yeah,
out there. We should definitely come
yeah.
back and
No,
touch
so
on that.
we are definitely going to come back after episode 25. We will come back and talk about this issue.
That's why I like you,
Okay, so
Mark. You already got it planned out. I got episode after 25. We're coming back to it. I
yeah,
love it.
after episode 25 because we're going to be setting a vision in episode 25. So let's go to 10, which is leader. That's one of my favorite words because we've got like 3 minutes to go and I've got a whole bunch of slides and I'll probably get rid of the last three. So this will be the last slide we're talking about.
Okay. All right, go ahead and talk about it. I'll
Leader,
pop it up there.
leader. Okay, so people say that the leadership will take care of us, and I don't know what the hell they're talking about, quite honestly. What leadership? Okay, so the House of Representatives, they aren't leaders. They're representing. They're supposed to be taking our voice and representing us in Congress. That's the way it's built. That's the way it's supposed to happen. But if they don't represent us, they aren't doing their job. If we're talking about them being leaders, they are not leaders. If we're talking about senators, senators are not leaders. The president, is a leader, but he's a leader supposedly representing the country and in a check and balance system. The truth is, the leaders of this country are we the people. but we can't even talk to each other. We use words imprecisely. We don't ask questions for clarification. And I'm saying we as a general we, not pointing at any fingers at anybody, but it's a difficult situation to build community unless you ask questions, unless you use words precisely, unless you question the words and how they're being used. And one of the reasons that we do this program while we're pushing this is that um, one of the first things we determined was necessary in the Kitsap Resiliency Project to create local leadership within a community is to teach people how to ask questions, how to think through a problem, how to connect other people who are difficult to talk to, who don't agree with them, how to listen and find a place where there's common ground. And we've tried the workshops 3 or 4 times, and we can't get anybody's attention to go sit to be part of the workshops. But yet, it's vital to learn these skills so that we can connect to each other and help and have people in the neighborhoods that can facilitate those connections amongst people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all I can do is model the behavior to the best of my ability, as Marwan models the behavior to the best of his ability. And sometimes that's calling bullshit on me, and that's cool. But we need to learn how to communicate again, because it's a skill that we've lost. And I think I'm up at 158, which means you're right on your schedule, Marwan.
I appreciate that. And what I would say to that too is I think we can be leaders in a lot of different ways, right? Leader isn't a position or a title. You can lead by example. And I think that is probably the most powerful leadership. I often would say, I would say, an advisor, you come into a new position and you're the low person, right? You have the last one in, first one out. Your voice matters the least. But what I found is, and my phrase was that I would steer the bus from the back, that I can be a leader and I can drive change, not being the bus driver. I can sit in the back. I don't have to sit right behind the bus driver, but I can influence things because of leadership, right? Because of leading by example, by making sound arguments, by having statistics, by listening. Negotiation. I tell folks all the time, negotiation isn't win-lose. It's win-win, and the best negotiation is when you understand not only your interest, but the party that you're negotiating with, not against, their interest also, right? Because that's where the solution is. And so they can't see it. They've got a problem that they're trying to solve, and they kind of know what their interests are. But you looking at it from another lens may be able to help solve their problem while simultaneously solving your own. And so I look at leadership in that way.
And the word that goes with that very statement, Marwan, is that one of my favorite words is synergy.
Mm. Yeah, that's one that's not up there. Now we do have a hard out, so we are going to. I invite everyone to join us. This will be the only week that this happens. It will always be the 3rd week of the month, and the reason being is I will be covering. Let me find that the acronym is long there. Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition. So we are working with them to see if we can't live broadcast their meeting, which happens once every month. It is open, but my intent is to bring these organizations and the work they're doing to you. And so because of that, this is when their meeting is. So I'm going to go and join that meeting. I invite you to click on the show that will launch here in about a minute and a half and come and join us there. And then on the other side of that, Matt and Jill and others will come on and we'll recap and go a little bit in depth. And then tonight at 5, we have a new show, and that show, and I'm hoping that you'll join at the after mark when you have time. But I'm going to be covering city council meetings from here on out unless something happens. And then after that, we're going to do a post show. And so I look forward to you joining me there. Jeff Campbell will be my host on that show, and he is a prominent voice in housing and homelessness in the community.
Yep.
He's a big champion.
Michael and I are both part of his group.
Oh, okay. So tonight you'll see me and Jeff, Mark. So I hope that you'll tune in and maybe join. We'll have some other new voices that hopefully will come out of the show and jump on. And we're just going to have a discussion based on what happened in city council. And so, again, the whole point of the conduit is to elevate voices, to educate, to provide access, right? The conduit is a two-way vessel of communication.
Right. And we have to point out that next week there will be no tipping points and puzzle pieces, also because it's the third Wednesday of the month. And there's usually the fourth Wednesday, the fourth Wednesday of the month, which is the pancake breakfast at 4040 Wheaton Way at New Horizons Ministries. And please show up at 11 o'clock, have breakfast on us, and we will have a great conversation and listen to the Bremerton Housing Authority and Kitsap Community Resources. So the third Wednesday of every month, we will not be doing a tipping points and puzzle pieces. There's a pancake breakfast. And then on the following day at 4 o'clock at Viewcrest Village, we will be hosting a barbecue for the community.
Whoop, whoop. There it is. So join us then. That barbecue will be from 4 to 6:30 p.m. And we'll have some announcements before next week. So thank you, everybody. For Mark, I am Marwan, Resilient Ecosystems. We'll see you next time.